After my dad's funeral, I stayed home alone until my best friend's dad showed up and unlocked the door I had closed in my heart. They say grief makes you see things that aren't there. I wasn't hallucinating, but I was wearing my dead father's flannel shirt when I opened the door and saw him standing there. "Hey, kid," he said, his voice a little too soft, like he was afraid I might shatter. And maybe I would have if I hadn't already broken into a million pieces days ago. "My name's Eli. I'm 22. My dad died last Tuesday." He collapsed on the porch while trimming the stupid rose bushes he hated, and I found him with the shears still in his hand. The paramedics were gentle. The funeral was cruel. And after everyone left, all that was left of my world was silence and the ticking of the broken clock above the fireplace. I hadn't planned on staying here, in the old house. But the couch still smelled like him. His half-read books were still stacked by the bed. And his toolbox, the sacred, untouchable toolbox, was still locked in the garage like a shrine. I couldn't leave. Not yet. Not when every corner of this house still whispered his name. I thought I was alone. Until he showed up. His name's Daniel Walker. 50 years old. Architect. Kind eyes. Silver at his temples, but still strong hands, the kind that could build a house or hold you together. He was also, as fate would have it, the father of my best friend, Mason. Mason, who moved to Oregon last year and hadn't texted since Christmas. Daniel had driven 4 hours just to be here. Just to check on me. Or maybe on my dad's ghost. I didn't ask him why. I didn't know how. He stood on the porch in his camel coat, looking like a man who wasn't sure if he should knock twice. "I was in the area," he lied gently. "Sure," I said. He looked older than I remembered. The lines around his mouth were deeper, like he'd been clenching his jaw too long. He smelled faintly of cedarwood and coffee, two things my dad hated but I had always liked. He didn't ask if he could come in. He stepped inside like he belonged there. And maybe he did. He and my dad used to be closer than I'd realized until after the eulogy. Men don't usually cry at funerals. But Daniel had. Quietly. Fist clenched. Like grief was something he wasn't allowed to show. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said. "I'm not a kid," I replied, sharper than I meant to. "I didn't say you were." Silence. He glanced around like the house was a crime scene. Maybe it was. There was still dried tea on the kitchen counter, half a dozen unwashed plates, and a framed photo of me and my dad from my high school graduation, the one where we both looked like we were trying too hard to smile. He took off his coat. Rolled up his sleeves. "You eating?" "Not really." "Then let's fix that." We didn't talk much that night. He made grilled cheese and tomato soup. The kind my dad used to make when I was sick, except this one had basil and fresh mozzarella. Fancy. But warm. I sat across from him, watching him eat like I was watching someone else's life play out in my kitchen. My stomach growled before I even took a bite. I hadn't eaten since the funeral. Afterward, he washed the dishes without asking, and I let him. Because I couldn't make myself move. Because it felt strangely comforting to hear the sound of running water and ceramic plates clinking softly. It sounded like something human. When he was done, he sat beside me on the couch. Not too close. But not far. "You know," he said, voice low, "your dad was one of the bravest people I ever met." I didn't answer. "He loved you. Even when he didn't know how to show it." I swallowed hard. He looked at me. "I loved him too," he added, even softer. That made my head turn. "What?" He smiled, or maybe winced. "He never told you?" "No. Didn't think he would." I stared. My mouth was dry. "I don't understand." Daniel leaned back on the couch and exhaled, like he'd been holding that breath for 10 years. There was a time. A long time ago. When he and I were more than friends. My throat closed. I started. But I didn't know what came after. Daniel nodded, as if he'd already had this conversation with himself 1,000 times. It didn't last. He got scared. Chose the life he thought he had to live. Got married. Had you? I stood up. Not angry. Just overwhelmed. The room felt too small. My skin too tight. I walked to the kitchen, gripping the counter with white knuckles. You okay? He asked gently. No, I said honestly. But keep talking. That night, we sat up until 3 a.m. He told me stories not just about my dad, but about the man my father used to be. The wild college years. The road trip to New Mexico. The night they slept under the stars in the desert and shared more than a sleeping bag. It was like finding a whole new chapter in a book I thought I'd finished. And with every story, something in me cracked open. I think he wanted to tell you, Daniel said. But he was afraid you'd hate him. I wouldn't have. I know. Pause. He never stopped loving you, I said. Daniel didn't answer. His eyes were red. The next day, he stayed. He fixed the leaky sink. Repaired the broken step on the porch. Listened when I finally cried, really cried, not the silent tears I'd been swallowing, but the ugly, full-body sobs that made my chest ache. And when I collapsed against him, he held me. Not like a father. Not like a friend. Like someone who knew what it meant to lose the love of your life and still keep breathing. There were no promises. No lines crossed. Just warmth. Quiet. A beginning. The house felt less haunted with him in it. He started coming by more often. Sometimes to cook. Sometimes to fix things. Sometimes just to sit on the porch with a cup of coffee and the memory of my dad between us. And sometimes, when the grief got too heavy, he let me lean my head against his shoulder and breathe. He never asked for anything. But I started to give him things anyway. Trust. Laughter. Space. A piece of my heart that had been locked behind grief and guilt and the fear of what it meant to feel again. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of a story. Maybe it was the start of something neither of us had dared to hope for. Daniel stayed for 3 days the first time. 3 quiet, heavy, comforting days. We didn't talk about what happened between him and my dad again, not directly. But the memory of it lingered in the air, like dust you only notice when sunlight hits it just right. He left a note on the fridge when he went back to Portland. Call me. Anytime. You shouldn't carry all of this alone. He signed it with just his initial D, simple. Thoughtful. Safe. And I hated how much I looked at that note the next few days. Grief had made me hollow, but Daniel, he had a way of fitting into that hollow space like he belonged there. Like he always had. 3 weeks passed. People stopped calling. The casseroles ran out. The mail piled up. And the loneliness got louder. I tried to distract myself. Cleaned out closets. Reorganized the attic. Read old letters my dad had kept in a locked tin, letters from Daniel, full of casual jokes and cryptic half-truths. I couldn't read more than a few at a time without feeling like I was spying on something sacred. Then one morning, I woke up on the living room floor, the TV playing some dumb game show, and realized I hadn't eaten in almost 2 days. So I did what I didn't think I'd do. I texted him. You still good at making grilled cheese? The reply came 10 minutes later. Only if you've got real butter. I'm on my way. When Daniel returned, something had changed in both of us. He walked in like the place was familiar now, not out of habit, but out of care. He brought groceries, a six-pack of sparkling water, and a cinnamon candle I pretended not to notice. I didn't know how to tell him I'd missed him. So I made a dumb joke about his ancient Volvo and let him tease me back about my bedhead and the fact that my socks didn't match. Normal. Safe. Until dinner was done and the music was playing low on the old record player, and we found ourselves slow dancing in the living room. I don't even know who started it. One moment, he was humming along to a Sam Cooke song. The next, I felt his hand on my back, gentle, grounding. "I'm not good at this," I said, barely above a whisper. "Me neither." We didn't dance like lovers. Not yet. But we didn't dance like friends, either. His palm was warm. My heart was louder than the music. And when the song ended, we didn't let go right away. I kept waiting for the world to end after that night. But it didn't. Instead, it got simpler. He came by twice a week. Then 3 times. Helped me sort through paperwork. Sat with me during the estate lawyer meetings. Took me to visit my dad's grave when I was too scared to go alone. And when he held my hand, he didn't make a big deal out of it. He just let me feel everything, the ache, the hope, the fear. And then one night, when the sky cracked with thunder and I couldn't sleep, he stayed. Not on the couch. Not across the hall. In my bed. With one arm around my waist and his breath steady on the back of my neck. He didn't kiss me. Not yet. But I think in that silence, something much louder happened. I let him in. People started to talk. It's a small town. They noticed his car parked in my driveway. Noticed him holding my shoulder a little longer than necessary at the farmer's market. Noticed how we both looked. Different. Lighter. Alive. And of course, they had opinions. The whispers started first. Then the looks. Then the comments. "You know he's twice your age, right? What would your dad think? Is this some kind of phase?" Even Mason called, out of nowhere, for the first time in months. "You're sleeping with my dad." I blinked. "Hello to you too, Mason. You didn't think I'd find out? I didn't know you still cared." "That's not fair." "No, Mason. What's not fair is disappearing for a year and then showing up only to police who your father spends time with." There was a long silence. I didn't expect this. "With you. It's weird." "I know," I said. "It's weird for me too. But it's real." He didn't hang up. But he didn't say anything else, either. Daniel offered to back off. "If this is too much, if it's hurting your relationships." But I stopped him before he could finish. "You are not the problem." "Then what am I?" "You're the first thing in months that doesn't feel like a lie." That shut him up. And then, finally, after all the grief and noise and aching restraint, he kissed me. Slow. Certain. Like he had been waiting a lifetime for permission. Loving Daniel wasn't easy. It meant learning how to breathe again. It meant unpacking every fear I'd shoved in a box labeled later. It meant rebuilding parts of myself I didn't know were broken, not just from losing my father, but from years of hiding behind jokes and silence. Daniel didn't try to fix me. He just stayed. And that was more than anyone had ever done. He taught me how to cook risotto. How to change the oil in my car. How to say no without apologizing. He showed me that love doesn't have to look like fireworks. Sometimes it looks like folding laundry together on a Sunday morning. Or sharing a cup of coffee in silence because no words are needed. Sometimes, it looks like a man who once loved your father helping you find your way back to life. And sometimes, it looks like healing. But of course, things got harder before they got better. There was a knock on the door one Friday night. I opened it and found Mason standing there, soaked from rain, his jaw clenched like he'd rehearsed something awful in the car. "Can we talk?" I nodded. Daniel stayed in the kitchen. We sat on the porch, the rain ticking softly against the railing. "I shouldn't have ghosted you," Mason said first. "I didn't know how to handle things. After my mom died. After you came out. After everything." I looked at him. "I missed you." He laughed without humor. "Then you started sleeping with my dad. You make it sound so casual. I don't know how else to make sense of it. I didn't plan any of this, Maze. I know. I didn't fall for him because of some daddy issues or whatever your friends are whispering. I know." I looked at him, really looked, and saw the hurt behind the sarcasm. "You mad because he's with me? Or because he's finally happy and you weren't part of that?" He didn't answer right away. "Then, both." I sighed. "I'm sorry," he added. "It's just weird, okay? You're my best friend. He's my dad. There's this part of me that still wants to be 12 and pretend adults don't have feelings." "Well," I said softly. "They do. And sometimes those feelings help you survive." Mason nodded slowly. "You love him?" "Yeah." He blew out a breath. "Then I guess I better get used to it." We didn't hug. Not that night. But when he left, he said, "Tell him I said hi." And that was enough. Spring came slower that year, like the world itself was still in mourning. The rose bushes bloomed late, stubborn and wild, thorns curling like clenched fists, and I didn't have the heart to trim them. So Daniel did. He knelt in the garden in that same old flannel shirt of my dad's I hadn't realized he'd kept, wiping sweat from his brow like he belonged in this house, in this life. In mine. He looked up at me once, eyes shaded by sunlight. "You watching me for pleasure or for safety?" "Both," I smirked. He grinned, and I swear to God, his laugh felt like the first warm breeze after months of gray. We still weren't calling it anything. No labels. No dramatic declarations. But the way I looked for him in the mornings, the way his toothbrush had quietly found a place in my bathroom, the way his mug became his and no one else's, it meant something. Everything. And maybe I didn't need to define it. Maybe some things are stronger when they're left unnamed. But the universe has a habit of testing the things you think are safe. It started with a letter. A thick, cream-colored envelope with my father's name on the return address, except it wasn't his handwriting. I tore it open, hands trembling, and found a legal notice. Apparently, my dad had named Daniel as co-executor of the estate. Which made no sense. None. He had a lawyer. He had me. Why would he put Daniel on that list? I stared at the document like it might reveal a secret if I held it long enough. Daniel looked just as confused when I showed it to him. "He never told me," he said, voice quiet. "I didn't know." "Why would he do that?" He didn't answer at first. Just sat down at the kitchen table, fingers trailing the edge of the paper like it burned. And then he said, "Maybe he knew he'd leave you with too much. Maybe he knew I'd still be here when he couldn't be." My throat tightened. "Is that what this is?" I asked. "You staying out of obligation?" He looked up sharply. "Is that what you think?" "No," I whispered. "But sometimes I don't know what to believe anymore." Daniel stood slowly and crossed the room. He cupped my face in his hands, the same way he had the night I'd first broken down in front of him. "I am here," he said, every word measured and clear. "Because I want to be. Not because I feel like I have to be. Not because I owe your father anything. Not because I'm trying to fix you." I nodded, unable to speak. And he added, softer, "You are not a weight I carry, Eli. You are a home I chose." That night, I dreamed of my dad for the first time since the funeral. He was sitting at the dining table, sipping tea, staring out the window like he used to on stormy days. When I walked into the room, he looked at me and smiled. "Glad you opened the door," he said. Then he turned into light and disappeared. I woke up sobbing. Daniel didn't ask what happened. He just held me until the crying passed. A few weeks later, I got a call from Mason again. "I've been thinking," he said. "Oh. Shut up." I laughed. It felt good. Real. He continued, "You and Dad, it still weirds me out. But he's different. Lighter. He doesn't grind his teeth in his sleep anymore. And you don't sound like someone trying to disappear every time I call." "Gee, thanks. You know what I mean." There was a pause. Then. "I'm coming home next month. Thought I'd stay a few days. See you." "See him. That'd be good." He cleared his throat. "You gonna make me risotto?" "Only if you bring wine." "Done." Then, before he hung up, he added, "I'm proud of you. And him. I think Dad finally let himself live." Summer came hot and fast. The house warmed with it. Daniel started sleeping over more. Then not leaving at all. Slowly, without a ceremony, we became a couple. It didn't need announcing. The town adjusted or got bored of whispering. At the farmer's market, the barista started labeling our coffee cups with little hearts. The neighbors waved more often. And one day, Mrs. Jenkins from down the street came by with an old box of books she'd borrowed from my dad years ago. "Thought you boys might want these," she said. "He always loved the one about the lighthouse." She patted Daniel's shoulder, gave me a wink, and shuffled off. The world hadn't ended. In fact, it felt like it was just beginning. Still, not everything was sunshine and roses. We argued. About dumb things. Groceries. The thermostat. Which side of the bed was his? But also about bigger things. Daniel sometimes pulled away without warning. Disappeared into himself for hours. "I'm not used to being this seen," he admitted once. "I know," I said. "But I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to stay." And he did. He always came back. And I learned to stop expecting people to leave. That was new. That was everything. One night, as we watched a storm roll in from the back porch, Daniel turned to me and said, "Do you think your dad would have been okay with us?" The question hit like thunder. I stared into the dark sky for a long time before I answered. "I think," I said slowly, "he would have been confused. Maybe a little scared. But mostly I think he'd be relieved that I found someone who gives a damn." Daniel nodded. "Then that's enough," he said. And it was. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt lived in. The silence wasn't heavy now, it was peaceful. We started renovating the garage together. Turned the old shed into a studio for Daniel's drawings. Repainted the guest room. Sorted through boxes and boxes of old memories and let go of what didn't fit anymore. And in doing that, I found pieces of myself I hadn't seen in years. I found laughter in the corners of the kitchen. I found forgiveness in the scent of Daniel's cologne on my pillow. I found love in the way he hummed old songs while brushing his teeth. Love. There. I said it. That word. That truth. And one night, I told him. "I love you." He froze, toothbrush halfway to his mouth, and stared at me through the mirror. Then he turned, dropped the toothbrush, and kissed me with more fire than I'd ever known. "I've loved you," he whispered, "since the first time you slammed the door in my face. Sometimes, I still talk to my dad. Not out loud. Not in prayers. But when I sit under the old oak tree in the yard, when the wind moves just right and I can smell the summer grass, I feel him. And I say thank you. For the house. For the silence. For Daniel. For knowing, somehow, that the man he once loved might be the one to bring me back from the brink. Maybe that's what love is. Not possession. Not perfection. But legacy. Leaving behind something, someone who keeps the light on when you're gone. Fall arrived like a hush after a long song, golden, crisp, quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't ache. The leaves turned, the air cooled, and the house felt settled, like it had taken a breath and finally exhaled after holding it all year. Daniel and I had found a rhythm. Mornings started with coffee and crossword puzzles. Evenings were slow and unhurried, filled with quiet dinners, old records, shared books. I stopped checking my phone to see who wasn't texting. I stopped expecting the floor to fall out from under me. One Saturday, we decided to repaint the front door. Something symbolic, something new. Red? Daniel suggested. I raised an eyebrow. Too loud. Blue. Too sad. We settled on forest green. It looked strong. Alive. A color that promised something steady. He painted. I watched, sipping cider, barefoot on the porch, thinking about how far we'd come. You ever think about moving? He asked, half joking, eyes still on the brush strokes. Moving where? I don't know. Oregon. Maine. Somewhere where no one knows us. Fresh start. I stared at him. Is that what you want? He paused. No. Not really. Not anymore. Just thinking out loud. I leaned against the railing. This house holds too much of my dad. And now, too much of you. I think I want to stay. Not forever, maybe. But for now. He smiled. For now sounds good. We hosted Thanksgiving that year. It wasn't planned. But Mason came home again, this time with his boyfriend, a loud, kind-hearted guy named Tyler who laughed at all my jokes and made the best mashed potatoes I'd ever tasted. Daniel cooked the turkey. I handled dessert. Mason brought pie from a bakery in Portland because, quote, none of you can bake worth a damn. The house was full for the first time in months. Music. Laughter. Chairs scraping on hardwood floors. Tyler and I getting into a heated debate about rom-com tropes. Mason rolling his eyes while secretly smiling. Daniel sneaking an arm around my waist as he passed by the kitchen, brushing his lips against my neck like it was nothing, like it was everything. It felt like something holy. Not perfect. But real. And at the end of the night, when everyone had gone to bed and the dishes were drying in the sink, Daniel and I stood on the porch together, watching our breath curl into the cold night. I never thought I'd have this, he said softly. This? You. Us. Family. I took his hand. Me neither, I said. But I'm not giving it back. Winter came. It snowed early, blanketing the town in white. Daniel built a fire, and I taught him how to make cocoa the way my dad did, too much sugar, just enough salt. We played cards, got snowed in, read novels in bed until midnight. He made me laugh. I made him blush. We fit. But even in the warmth, even in the love, there was still grief. Grief doesn't leave. It just changes shape. One afternoon, while sorting through the attic again, I found an old cassette tape. Labeled, in my dad's handwriting, for D, in case I never say it. I stared at it for a long time. My hands shook when I brought it downstairs. Daniel was reading. He looked up when he saw me, eyes landing on the tape in my hand. Do you want to listen? I asked. He nodded once. Slowly. Carefully. I put the tape in the player. Pressed play. My dad's voice crackled through the speakers. Younger. Raw. "Hey, Danny," he said, voice low. "If you're hearing this, it means I chickened out. Again." A breath. A laugh. "I've lived a good life. Married a good woman. Raised the best damn kid. But there's always been this ache. This part of me I left behind. With you." Daniel closed his eyes. The tape continued. "I never stopped loving you. Even when I tried. Even when I buried it. It was always there. And I don't know what your life looks like now, or if you've moved on, or if you still hate me a little for how things ended. But I want you to know, I don't regret what we had. I regret not fighting harder for it." A pause. "I hope, somehow, you find your way back to love. Even if it's not with me. Just don't let the world harden you. Don't hide like I did." The tape clicked off. Silence. Daniel didn't speak. He just wept. And I held him like he'd once held me, steady, open, unafraid. We scattered my dad's ashes that spring. I thought I'd cry. Instead, I felt light. We chose the hiking trail he loved, the one that overlooked the valley, where wildflowers bloomed in every color imaginable. Daniel carried the urn. Mason came too. We stood in the sunlight, wind brushing our skin, and I whispered goodbye. Not because he was gone, but because he was everywhere now. In the roses. In the green door. In the sound of Daniel's laugh. In the way I no longer feared silence. The last time someone asked me how we ended up together, I said this. Grief broke me. But love found the pieces. There was no fairy tale. No perfect kiss in the rain. Just slow mornings, hard conversations, shared pain, and the quiet, radical act of choosing each other again and again. He didn't save me. I didn't fix him. We just showed up. And somehow, in the middle of all the loss, we built something worth keeping. Something real. One night, months later, I came home from a trip to find the house quiet. A note was waiting on the kitchen table. Back porch. Come find me. I stepped outside and saw him standing under the string lights we'd hung last summer. He wore that stupid flannel again. He looked nervous. I wanted to wait for the right moment, he said. I smiled. And? There's no such thing. Then he pulled a small box from his pocket. My heart stopped. I don't want to ask you for forever, he said. I just want to ask you for today. And tomorrow. And maybe the one after that. He opened the box. A ring. Simple. Gold. Familiar. It was my dad's. I asked Mason, Daniel said quietly. He wanted you to have it. I didn't cry. I laughed. Then I said yes. And the rest of the world disappeared. We didn't have a wedding. Just a backyard barbecue with people who loved us and didn't ask questions. Mason gave a toast. Said something about grief and rebirth and forgiveness. Tyler cried. Mrs. Jenkins brought deviled eggs. And that night, as we sat beside the fire pit, wrapped in one blanket, I looked at Daniel and whispered, we made it. He smiled. No, he said. We are making it. Then he kissed me like the world had never broken. And maybe, just maybe, it hadn't. The end. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.